Shalom Aleichem. It's Erev Shabbos Kodesh Parshas Dvarim. It's Shabbos Chazoin. As the Heilige Beis Rivka says, that the Eibush shows all Yid the third Beis Hamikdash. And first of all, I want to say that the Shir is a schus for the Fuhr Shleima, for Meir Chaim ben Chai Yetzira, and for a dear friend of my wife's whose name I do not know, but I'll find it out, but the Raval is on the schusa. It's also for the schus Lila Nishmas of Moshe Yehuda ben Tzvi Yosef, Rabbi Kotlarski, and it's chus for success in the zivig, and the shidduch, and the chasane, the klila, and everything that comes after, the peiros and the peiros of our children, Itai ben Tzipeda, and David Alea bas Shtene Sora, and Shmuel ben Shtene Sora, and Chaya Mushka Musya bas Chane. Should be a binyan a deyad. B'teva nida v'nigla mat masalat fochem and ala gute zachen. Now, Rabbi say I'm trying to chaparai noch hamayim before Shabbat. I don't know if I'm going to finish, but I want to start. This is a maimah of Eikev, not Vos Chanan Eikev. Shabbos mevorchim already. No, it's not Shabbos. It's the Shabbos before Shabbos. The Shabbos after Chof Ov, Tov Lamed Aleph, from 50 years ago. Now, I learned this maimah, and the maimah really got me excited. Because in this maimah I feel how the Rebbe 50 years ago is prophesizing about now, mamish. Now when I say the word mamish, it's a bit of a simplification. Because 50 years ago, in many ways, the condition was very similar to how it is now. One of the differences between 50 years ago and now is that 50 years ago I was 8. And now I'm 58. Small difference. At that time in my life, I guess you could say I was a very chassidish kid. I think that's accurate. I knew nothing but the Eibush, the Rebbe, and the Torah, and mitzvahs, and Yerushalayim. So I believe I remember it from then, from my 8-year-old self, although I don't believe my own belief. You know, did I learn it then or did I listen to the tapes later? But it was after the Yom Kippur War, which was a terrible war. We won the war. And we lost so much that we had gained during the 6-day war for all kinds of silly reasons. And of course the basic reason is because we didn't want to be the, quote, aggressor. We didn't want to fire the first shot, which we should have. And this year, 50 years later, again, we didn't want to fire the first shot, and it cost us untold suffering. And we all hope that this time around we've, so to speak, learned our lessons. They showed a video of the Rebbe saying, Hat kafa, you got to start up, not react, but you have to proact. You see in gem videos how they talk about the Yom Kippur War. They gave them out earlier this year. How there's a Yid who lived in Far Rockaway, who was like the head of the chinuch of the Dati Leumi of the from Tziyonim, and he had a relationship with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe summoned him to Crown Heights and told him to go to Tel Aviv. He was going to Tel Aviv anyway, and he should go into the Knesset and he should tell Moshe Dayan in the Rebbe's name, a pkudah, a command. And the pkudah is that they should take Damascus, they should take Damascus even for 1 hour. I think the Rebbe said to him or to somebody else that it says in Kabbalah Sfarim the Mashiach doesn't come until Damascus falls. It says in Zayah, the Mashiach doesn't come when Damascus falls, the Yerushalayim rises. So he, who was a frum person, was afraid to go to Moshe Dayan and Golda Meir. He didn't know how they would react to the Rebbe's giving pekudis from America. But when he met them, they were incredibly receptive. He saw how much they respected the Rebbe's words. They took him very seriously. But they told him that they couldn't do it physically. They didn't have the military, they didn't have the people, they didn't have the fuel. So he had to call back and tell the Rebbe that the order was turned down. Benjamin Klein Al Vashalom Zachin Levracha picked up the phone and he explained that we don't have enough men, and the Rebbe got really upset. The Rebbe was on the line. He said that you can use their oil, their petroleum, that they left behind when they ran away. And when they told him, Ba'oif and Saifi, as a final word, that they're not going to do it, he said he heard the Rebbe screaming in the background, big mistake, and hung up the phone. And you can almost feel when you watch that film that the Rebbe is talking about now. We have to finish. You know, Jewish people are not violent people. We're not. We're peace-loving people. And we're not just peaceful people, we're kind people. We're people of Rachmanim and Baishanim and Gem Lechasadim. But there's a difference between being kind and being stupid. And the difference is, we're dealing with a situation that if we want to live in peace with the Arabs, we have to be tough. They will not allow it to be any other way because of their nature. I'm not the Rebbe, I'm a nobody, but if you listen to the Rebbe makes it very clear. You have to show them how much you mean that you're prepared to use whatever kind of force necessary to suppress them, and you go after them, and not only you defeat them in battle, no ceasefire, don't stop in the middle, so you're giving them a chance to rearm, but you defeat them completely. You have to embarrass them. Because embarrassing them is worse than killing them, and then you can make peace with them because they're not dead. And until you embarrass them, it's going to come back again, They celebrate Ada Yom Hazeh, the Yom Kippur War. They lost the Yom Kippur War terribly, and they make a parade and we don't. It shows you their personality. They have to be defeated. They have to be defeated not just physically, but mentally. And then we'll never have to fight with them again, and then we can have peace with them. Fakeret, we'll keep them alive, in peace. But it cannot happen until this is completed. And the Rebbe was so unhappy that it wasn't completed then. And then, of course, a few years later, we had the whole story with the Camp David Accords, and how much that hurt the Rebbe. And we all wish the Rebbe was a little bit wrong. Everything that Rebbe talked about. And at the time he talked about it was so hard to understand. He seemed to be so irrational. Has come to pass with the prophetic accuracy that's very, very, very painful. And safe, you have to learn that when the Rebbe speaks, you got to listen. I remember we would sit at those fabrengens, we would stand at those fabrengens, and then we would mutter to each other, how could they not listen to the Rebbe? And there'd be one old chassid who would turn around and look at me in the eye and say, and do you listen to the Rebbe? They have to listen to the Rebbe in their inyanim. You have to listen to the Rebbe in your inyanim. I have to listen to the Rebbe in my inyanim. And for all of us it's hard. For all of us it's very hard. Because the Rebbe doesn't give us a hira which is written in the Torah. The Rebbe doesn't give us a hira which we already know. He gives us something which is lechatchila ribber. Shtuz de gedush. Beyond the limitations. And the Rebbe is expecting from them to go beyond their limitations, and he's expecting from us that we should go beyond our limitations. And it's hard. It's hard for them, it's hard for us. But it's the tzava shor. It's what you have to do. So in that year, Lamed Daled, one of the psukim, I remember as a child, that made Yemel the 4 mitzvahs, Teira and Mezuzah, and Stokah and Bayis Malis Farim Yavne B'Chachamea. The mitzvah tefillin made right before the 6-day war. These mitzvahs happened after the Yom Kippur War, which lasted a total of about 20 days. As opposed to this war, which is now going on, I don't know how many months. And one of the Rebbe spoke a lot about war, tactics of war. One of the things he spoke about was kamas and echos, that the Israelis, the Jewish people, always have a smaller army. But the advantage of quality over quantity, and this war now, even now, that idea of kamas and echos is playing out. The Jewish people are never, atam amat mikol amim is a constant. And of course we win not because we're so strong or because we're so smart, but because the Eibishter loves us. But we daf machen akeli, davzan kanana katipish. So he spoke a lot about that. And he would very often quote the pasuk in Tilim, Kapitel Kuf Chav Zayin pasuk Aleph, right? Shir Amalas l'shloimei. Shir Amalas l'shloimei. Im adeshem lo yivna bayis. Shav ablu beinav boy. Im adeshem lo yishmer ir. Shav shokal shemer. I remember as my 8-year-old self could remember saying that, the Rebbe saying that pasuk. If the Eibush doesn't build a house, Shav omlu beinav bay. The people are trying to build it, they're wasting their time. In Hashem la yishmer ir. If the Eibush doesn't guard a city, Shav shakat shemer. The guardian of the city is guarding it. Shav for nothing, futilely. In other words, things in this world that seem to be so worldly, like building a home, and building many homes and creating a city, and then protecting that home and protecting that city, which arguably is such a human endeavor based on the natural constraints of what a person is in reality Hashem yivna bayis and Hashem yishmarir. It's Eibishter doing it. And the Rebbe spoke about that in the context of that war, that the Eibishter protects the Jewish people, Hina Layanu Lishem Yisrael, which was the tone that Rebbe spoke about in 67 Chav Zayin by the 6-day war. But we have to do our part, right? That's the deal. There's the Yivna Bayis, and there's the Yishmarir, And ultimately, it's Hashem. So here's a maimed which the Rebbe spoke in Chedesh Menachem of Tafshin Lamed Dalet, which is a maimed about mezuzah. And the kernel of kernels of this maimed is a Zayar, which is quoted on page 196, footnote 25. That the Zohar says about mezuzah, Adeshem Yishmer Tzeitz Chaviyach Me'at Avdam, the mezuzah is a shmira, and it protects you when you're coming and when you're going. Now, of course, the Rebbe spoke many times then that Shin Dalad Yud, which is written on the outside of a mezuzah, is the Rosh Hashanah Shemer Dalsas Yisrael, that the mezuzah protects a person. And the kfetch doesn't only protect you when you're home, it protects you even when you go out. Hashem Yishmer Tzeitz Chaviyach Me'at Avdam. And at the time, there became right away a tumult. The Rambam says that you're not allowed to use the mezuzah as a kameya, and doing so isn't even apakusis and for kfira. And of course, the Rebbe had to defend himself to Einim Vakshan, the troublemakers that the Rebbe had to speak to. And the Rebbe is saying that you put up a mezuzah because the Eibishter said. You keep the mitzvah mezuzah because it's a mitzvah, but it has additional segula of being a shmira. So I don't know what was going on 10 months after the end of the Yom Kippur War, but I know what is going on now, because it's not 10 months after the war of Simchas Torah, it's the war is still ongoing. And as you and I are sitting here on this Friday afternoon, Iran is buzhaving and making noise, and Hezbollah and Hamas, Yemach Shemam Zechram. The Eibusher should give koyach and seichel to the Yidden to finish and to make the whole world safer for everybody. And we should be zeicher to this gals of Melech HaMashiach, take of me ad mamish. Yamid Melech Beis David Hege B'Teira. Ki David Av V'Teira Shebektav Deshbal Peh. Right? And became the mitzvahs V'Teira Shebektav Deshbal Peh. V'chuli, v'chuli, v'chuli. V'yilchem Chametz Hashem Yinatzeich. V'yikab B'Sitcha Yisrael. V'yud Beis Medish B'Mkoyme. And I'll even teach Goyim, B'derech Kfiyah and B'derech Limud, that they should be Makayim, what the Rebbe calls Sheva Mitzvahs Didahu. The 7 mitzvahs are B'nei Neach. So this maimed speaks to the mezuzah being a shmira. Not that that's the only reason to put up a mezuzah. The mitzvahs are not rachman v'chasada. The mitzvahs are gzeirus hamelech, like it says in the Mishnah B'negeh to kan sipa yigir rachamecha. But they also have a skula, and mezuzah has a skula that it's a shmira. What the Rebbe is going to do in this maimed is explain the idea that the mezuzah is a shmira. He's going to, it's based again on tzemach tzedek and erat Torah. And he's going to connect it, as the Tzemach Tzedek does, to this pasuk. Ima deshem lo yivne bayis shav ablu bein of bay. Ima deshem lo yishmir ir shav shokat shemer. But he's going to explain something a little bit more complicated. He's not going to say that without the Eibishter there's no binyan kvayachal, and without the Eibishter there's no shmira kvayachal. Although on one level that's true, but on another level there is amlu bein of bay. There is shokat shemer. And then there's Hashem Yivne Bayis and Hashem Yishmerir. And the way the Maimed is going to develop it, the way the Maimed is going to talk about it, the way the Maimed is going to explain it, what the Maimed is going to do is they're going to say is that there is a bias. And there is an Ir. And there's a little bit of a detail here that I don't fully understand in the Maimed, honestly. Put it in the Pshat. But the Hashem Yishmerir is higher than the Shakat Shemer. In other words, the avodah that we're able to do in Yivne Bayis, in building a house, Yishmerir, in guarding a city. But it's not enough. And you need to have a higher Yishmerir, which comes after from the Eibishter. So I guess you can say that this Maimed, which is 2 weeks after the Maimed of Shabbos Chazoin, is the same spirit of Shabbos Chazoin. That just like in Shabbos Chazoin we learned that there is Chesed and Rachamim of Tzadikim, and then there's Chesed and Rachamim of Bali Tshuva, which happens Dafki and Golos. You read it Tzedek Ali, and it's a higher Chesed than a Rachamim. In this Maimed you have a bias, and you have an Ir, and then you have Hashem Yivne Bayis and Hashem Yishmerir, which is an even higher Madrega. And just like in the previous Maimed, the Rachman Chasodim of Tzadikim is Seichel and Medida V'Agbala. The bias and the Ir, without the Eibishter's additional support, is the Madrega of Tzadikim, Avoida Api Seichel. And Hashem Yivne Bayis and Hashem Yishmerir is adding the higher Madrega to it. Now, I just spoke, I guess you could say, a little bit emotionally. In other words, maybe I overstated it. I know I overstated it. Because first of all, I feel like this Maimon said 50 years ago, is Pasha talking to us right now. It's Pasha talking to us right now. Right now, in Tafshin Pei Dalet, 2084. That's how I feel. I also have a record, I remember it from then. I was a little boy. When you denk abisele, you denk, I remember it. So that, of course, it excites me and inspires me. But to repeat again, maybe in a more collected way, this Maimon is going to speak about two madrigas. Of course, everything comes from the Eibishter. Without the Eibishter, there's nothing. But there is the idea, Kvayocha, where the Eibishter tells us in Seder Ishtalshus, so things are logical and orderly. And then there's the idea of Yinyarim Ishtalshus, Hechafa Seder Ishtalshus, above Seder Ishtalshus. Seder Ishtalshus begins with Chochma. Seder Ishtalshus begins with Seichel. Seder Ishtalshus begins with everything being B'medida V'Agbala. And higher than Seder Ishtalshus is beyond those limits. And this Maimon is going to speak to the realities of Seder Ishtalshus, and then to the idea of the exceeding or the transcending of Seder Ishtalshus, which is something which is higher than Seder Ishtalshus, which is going to be called Hashem Yishmerir. That's what the Maimon is going to do. And the idea which is going to represent this is the mezuzah, because the mezuzah is the higher Shmirah. And he's going to say something very fascinating. What makes the mezuzah the higher Shmirah is because the mezuzah is connected to the avodah of Kabbalah Seil Makash Maimon. You can imagine that. As you'll see in the Maimon, that the first parsha of Krishma is Kabbalah Seil. The second parsha of Krishma is also Kabbalah Seil, and Kabbalah Seil reaches Atzmos, and it brings down a Shmirah from Atzmos, which is above Seder Ishtalshus. So I want to start reading, but I need to show you something. I want you to go to page 196, second page. I want you to read a few lines that I put in the box, and it's numbered number 2. And this is there's 3 models in this Maimon. There is the whole world, there's the person's house, and there's the person's avodah. And in each of these 3 models, you're going to have 2 levels. The bias and the ear, which it is, and the shmira se'ir as it is by itself, and the bias and the shmira se'ir as it is because Hashem yishmer bias, Hashem yishmer, the higher madreg. And in this, he says these words. Look, Mishum zeh tzarech liyas hatfilah v'abakosha v'aza'oka. There's to be a prayer and a request and a screaming out. Ura lo masishon havaya. Wake up! Why are you sleeping, havaya? Now, normally, when you quote the pasuk Ura lo masishon havaya, it's connected to ani yeshena, right? And in Golos, the Eibush is sleeping. But yikas kiyosh havaya machzach v'yashloft. Right? Ura lo masishon havaya means that havaya is hiding. And in relationship to the world, there is what appears to be a sleep-like state, and therefore you want to wake him up. But not in this Maimon. In this Maimon, Ura lo masishon havaya means havaya is awake. As havaya is bez galus, as havaya is a gili of atzilis. So why is it called sleeping? Because compared to hine layonim v'layishin shemi Yisrael, compared to the Eibishter Shmira, which is higher than Shem Havaya, the Gili of Shem Havaya is considered sleep. And I'm reading on, the Kanal, as we said before, it's not enough. The Madreg of Teheri, which is Atzilus, and Brasa Yitzartan Afachta, which is Bri Yitzir and Asiya, but you have to have Atom Mishamra Bakiba, the word Shmira, but it's a higher Shmira, Hashem Yishmarir, from above Seder Ishtalshus. Says the Rebbe Mekein, Nene Maspik, it's also not enough. When the Eibush guards us and Eretz Yisrael, and Kol Echad V'Achas Mi Yisrael B'Chol Makom Shehem, it's not enough that it could be for Shem Havaya, Shari Yochel Eis B'Chin Shina, because Havaya could be asleep. Because Havaya could be asleep, the very fact that Havaya is subject to a Nin of Shina, so even when it's not asleep, you say Lo Masishon Havaya. And therefore you have to go to the Madrega of Layonam v'layishin Shem Yisrael ein bekicha the loinim, which is higher than Shem Havaya. Lam yeshnein yanali is a higher madrega, which is Layonam v'layishin Shem Yisrael, the Eibishter, who's the guardian of Eden, who's above Shem Havaya, never sleeps. You can't even say the possibility of sleep. So Ura lo masishon Havaya means why could Havaya be in a madrega where there's a possibility of sishon? And Layon v'layishin Shem Yisrael is higher than this, which is Lamayla m'Shem Havaya. It's above Shem Havaya. I'm going to read these few lines. This is a Shabbos Fabrengen. There's no tape of it. You can almost hear the Rebbe crying it out. And the Rebbe is saying that there's the Eibishter's Shmira, and then it's telling to the Eibishter Vashlofste, why are you sleeping? Not while he's asleep, while he's subject to sleep. And you want to reach a Madreg of Layon of Elisha Shem Yisrael. And I'm going to tell you, Stamazeh, in many shuls, this Tkufa, they're saying, whatever it is, Kuf Chafalef, Esa Ein Elahora Manya V'Yezri. Now this year's capital of the Rebbe is Kuf Chav Gimel. Allah Chanasas says, Eini HaYeshu B'Shamayim. It says in Zohar, on this pasuk, that Allah Chanasas says, Eini HaYeshu B'Shamayim is higher than Esa Ein Elahora. Because Es Ein Elahora is the Shem Havaya. And Allah the Shem Nafshi Esa, Shem Azalecha, Allah Chanasas is Eini HaYeshu B'Shamayim, is higher than Shem Havaya. In other words, the difference between Kuf Chav Aleph and Kuf Chav Gimel is different between Shmira from Shem Havaya and Shmira which is higher than Shem Havaya. Which is, of course, B'Ashgacha Pratis. This is the Rebbe's Peirik this year now. So let's learn this Maimer. It's a mezuzah Maimer. It's a Maimer about Shmira. And the whole Maimer is going to speak to the idea that there's a Shmira on top of a Shmira. The regular Shmira is a Shmira which comes from Madrega of Seichel. And the higher Shmira is the Madrega of Layon of Elisha Shem Yisrael, which is above a Shem Atzmas. We begin. In Pashas Eikev you have V'hoyim Shemoya. And V'hoyim Shemoya you have the second time in the Chumash, the mitzvah of mezuzah. Right? Tefillin you have 4 times in the Torah. Twice in Pashas Boi, Kaddish and V'hoyim Yacha. Once in V'oschan and Shema Yisrael, and once in Eikev V'hoyim Shemoya. Which is why in Tefillin you have all 4 Pashas, where each you put all 4 Pashas where Tefillin are mentioned, you put them into the Tefillin. But mezuzah is mentioned twice in the Torah, and these 2 pashas go into the mezuzah. You have to write them on the doorposts of your home and the doorposts of your gates. And the pashtas, it's a mitzvah. And I showed you before, the Zayar says it has a segula of Hashem Yishmer Tzeitzcha V'Yacham Yatav Yadoylo, that it's a shmira. And twice in the Torah, the shmira is recorded. The mitzvah mezuzah. We do a maimer tzamach tzedek b'divrei maschal zeh. Tzemach Tzedek has a maimer on this pasuk, which is be'era Torah. And by the way, in Tafshin Chav Ches, the Rebbe also said a maimer. Uchasav Tafshin Chav Tes, it says in the bottom of page 1. Uchasav al mezuzah b'zachar v'shalach. I think there's also a later one from the later years. Mir dachtzach korav lavadai. Here they're mitzaying to the maimer in Chav Tes. I looked it up. It's a much longer maimer. Shemak Shasham then asks a very interesting question. And the question is, what is the idea? What do you need? The mezuzah at the entrance to a person's home. Remember Kairach said, a house full of Sefer Torah doesn't need a mezuzah, because the Sefer Torah is the holiest thing in the world. The mezuzah is only 2 parashas. Sefer Torah has hundreds of parashas. And Moshe Rabbeinu said Chayeves, and Kairach laughed. This Maimer asks not the same question, but a similar question. Not Bayis Moli Svarim, but Bayis Moli Yehudim, a Jewish home. A Yid is holier than the Torah. Ma'adach, if there's a Torah, there's a Shaila, if you have to have a mezuzah. If you have a Yid, why do you have to have a mezuzah? Shemak Shama asks the question, Ma'awi in a mezuzah, Shekei Pesach HaBayis, why is it necessary to put a mezuzah in the home of a Jew? The Mekiv and Shabayis, so Beisach Shalisai, whereas this is the home of a Jew. And the gate is the gate of a Jew. Imkain, the question therefore is, why is it necessary to affix a mezuzah al Pesach Habayis v'ashad on the entrance to a home and a gate which belongs to a Yid? In other words, why is it not enough that it's Beisach of a Yid ubisharecha of a Yid atzmei? And I wrote on the margin, but then a chefshed. This is reminiscent of Tanya, Peirik Daled and Peirik Lamed Hey. But Alter Rebbe asked L'chele the same question twice, but he gives very different answers. The question is asked in Tanya is, why does a Jew need Judaism? Why does he need Yiddishkeit? Havastaf a Yid haben Yiddishkeit. Erdachalein a Yid. Like the famous Lashon that Rebbe used to bring, with a little bit of sarcasm, Samsa Poshnech, Nalina Shuster. A Yid is a chelik of the Kami Mal Mamish. So why does he have to have Torah mitzvahs? So in Peirik Dala the Tanya, the question is asked, and the answer that is given is because the neshama is hidden, and Torah mitzvah creates a revealed connection. And in Perek Lamed Hey is a very different answer. The lakus of a yid, even if it's begoloi, and the madrega of yira v'yava rabba b'tanugim is yesh misha'ev. And yid has to have Torah mitzvahs because of the ma'ila of bittul, and the ma'ila of bittul is what allows the Ruach HaKodesh rest, the lakus rests. So in one place in Tanya, the question is, what does the Jew need Judaism? And the answer is to reveal that he's a Jew. And another place in Tanya, it says, why does the Jew need Judaism if his Jewishness is revealed? And the answer is because it doesn't reach bittul, and bittul is only to doing a mitzvah, which the Eibishter commands us. Here you have a similar question. Why does the Jew need a mezuzah? He's himself a mezuzah. And the answer is going to be because there's two madregas. There's the mezuzah that the Yid can provide for himself, which is one madrega of Shmira, which is reasonable. And then there is Hashem Yishma Tzeis Chaviyacha Matvadeil Mashmira, which is above reasoning. For this, the Eibishter has Hashem Yishma Dir. For this, you have to have a mezuzah. So the Rebbe says, "Va'inyan hu the pshat hinik sivishneiten tilim im ad Hashem la Yishma Dir shav shakat chamber." If the Eibishter doesn't guard the city, the guardian is wasting his time. Even if he's shakat, even if he's diligent, if the Eibishter doesn't help, it doesn't work. Right? Whatever we succeed at, even if we're using our own koiches, and our own seichel, and our own midas, and our own chushim, is because the Eibishter does it for us, or with us. And the Rebbe says, it follows the beginning of the pasuk, which speaks about im Hashem la yivne bayis. If Hashem doesn't build a home, it's a waste of time to try and build. The Rebbe doesn't help you, doesn't allow you to build a home. You shouldn't even bother building it. And he says, Hashem Yishmar Ir. Now there's something missing in this maimed, which I don't understand. But I'm going to make it up, okay? And right now, I'm speaking on very thin ice. I'm conceding that I'm speaking on very, very thin ice. I'll tell you what it is. A house is one building. A city is a collection of many buildings. It says, Hashem Yishmar, Im Hashem la yivna bayis, shav amlu beinav bay. What should be the next thing? Im Hashem la yivna ir, shav amlu beinav bay. And then it should say, Im Hashem Yishmar Ir. So the Rebbe is thinking, and I think this is what he understands that Tzemach Tzedek to be saying, is that although without the Eibishter's help you can't build a house, but there's a certain level of building which we can do on our own without the Eibishter's help, which I think is the idea of Hashem la yivne ir. So look at the language. That before the Eibishter guards the city has to be built. And the city is built by people who toil to build it. That although in the beginning of the pasuk it also says Im Hashem la yivne bayis, but the fact that you call the builders is moving, it's understood. Sheyesh lehem im ma livnes, that the builders have the koiches to build. They're called builders. And if you want to be very specific, the Eibishter builds each individual house. But the collection of homes into a city, the Eibishter is not attributed to. Right? He's not credited with it. It's as if the builders do it. The one house, a second house, but the house has become an ear. It doesn't say in this pasuk, because there is a limited amount of koyach that the boinim have, that the builders have. They also got it from the Eibishter. But koyachal, it's there, is without the Eibishter's direct intercession. And the idea that our ability to build is to some extent our own koiches is implicit also from the Hemshech HaPasach, that it says Im Hashem la Yishmar Ir. Hashem doesn't build a city, but lekosav la yivne Ir. You see, the word of Ir is missing, but that's how I'm reading it. Hashem helps us build a house, and Hashem helps us guard a city. What about building from one house, a second house, a third house to make a whole city? Here it doesn't say Hashem yivne Ir, which is implying that a limited amount of koyach to build is our own. But it's a limited amount of koyach. And on top of the limited koyach, you need a greater koyach, which is represented by Yimad Hashem la Yishmar Ir. Zokte de mashma mizeh. From the fact that it doesn't say Yim Hashem Yivne Ir, Hashem Yivne Bayis, and then Hashem Yishmar Ir. So there's an aspect of binyan which Kvayochel, the Eibishter, the Tilim, David HaMelech, Shleima HaMelech, which is interesting. How many Kapitlach Tilim written by Shleima HaMelech? Shleima was all of 12 when David HaMelech passed away, and David compiled the whole Sefer Tilim, the Imz Miris Yisrael. Not for now. that the person does by himself. The mashma said that implies there is an aspect of building which Hashem has to help you with. Then there's an aspect of binyan which you can attribute to the boinim. And even when you have that aspect of binyan, which you contribute to the builder's kvayochel, it's not enough. And the building needs to be preserved. The building then needs to be guarded. You have to have the Shem, Yishma, the Eibishter guards. But the Shmir of the Eibishter goes not on an individual house, but it goes on Ir Dafka, the whole city. So Hashem helps us put up each individual piece. Hashem keeps the whole collective together. And in between those two, there is the idea that after you build one house with the Eibishter's help, and another house to help, you automatically have a city, which is implying that this the boinim are able to do by their own. But even though the boinim do that by themselves, that's not enough, and you have to have a shmir, and that's Hashem Yishmarir. So I don't know if what I just said is correct. I wrote on the margin that I don't understand these lines. I took a look in the Newer Hanacha. I'm not home, but when I was preparing the Maimon, I took a look in the Newer Hanacha. They try to write it a little bit more clearly, but it's still unclear. One thing is for sure, that in order to make this point, that there's something which we're able to do on our own, and then there's something which we cannot do on our own, we need the Eibishter's help. We start off with Boinav and then you move on to Shoyimid. B'chol Leifen, this Shtikel Maimed is arguing that there's an idea that people are able to do some things in a limited way, with the koichas that the Eibishter gave them on a level which is their own. And then beyond that, you have to have Im Hashem Yishmarir, which has to protect them. And he finishes the paragraph by saying, this is the concept of a mezuzah. You already have the home and you already have the gates. Like I said to you before, a yid by himself is a lakus. And even before he puts up a mezuzah, which is a mitzvah, the fact that a yid is in the home makes it a Jewish home. The fact that it's a Jewish city makes it a Jewish city. And it's Beis Rivka, which is already a lakus. You have to have a mitzvah. You have to put up a mezuzah at a higher madrega of guardianship. Now you can translate shmir in a desperate way to protect us from harm. But you can more precisely translate shmira from the word preservation. Keep it good, keep it healthy. So this is the shaila. What madrega of shmira could be by yourselves, and what madrega of shmira requires the mezuzah. The Rebbe began to talk about mezuzah. Pusha a maimed about mezuzah, and again, Tafshan Lamed Daled, I was 8, and if I had more time, and if I was at home, I'd take out the Svarim and I'd look inside. But the Rebbe, of course, spoke about this. Mezuzah was one of the main topics of Tafshan Lamed Daled, especially because we had that Maise, I think it was called in Ma'alot, where a bunch of children were killed, and the Apostle Mezuzahs, and the Rebbe was criticized for suggesting that the children died because of the Apostle Mezuzahs, and the Rebbe didn't say the children died because of the Apostle Mezuzahs. The Rebbe said the children were not protected because of the Apostle Mezuzahs. So it may be that this time of year that all that was going on, I don't know, I didn't look. But clearly it's Tafshan Lamed Daled, 50 years ago this year, and the Rebbe is talking about a mezuzah and shmira. And he continues and he says, V'hinei ha-mezuzah in Yonah Beis Pashas the Krishma. The mezuzah, which according to the Zohar, which we're going to see on page 196 as a Shmira, has the first 2 Pashas of Krishma. It says the Rebbe. The question is, the Gabi Kama in Yonah Nachshavas Krishma Gimel Pashas. Normally, Krishma is 3 Pashas with Vayomer. And yet, in the mezuzah, Vayomer is missing. There are other pashas there which also speak about preserving and also speak about blessing, and they're not included in the mezuzah. Case in base pashas, the kishmadafka, the mezuzah is only 2 pashas, not 3 and not more. And the shaila is why. This indicates there's a special connection. In connection between mezuzah, lebeis, pasha, the Krishma. These 2 pashas and Krishma have a special connection to a mezuzah. And in this maimer, the time for mezuzah is shmira. Ubefrat, particularly shagama, tziva, mitzvah, mezuzah, nemer, beis, pashas, elu, the Krishma dafke. And this is particularly underscored because the Rebbe speaks in a circle. You could put more pashas in the mezuzah because there's more pashas speak about shmira. And on the other hand, he says, isn't it interesting that the 2 pashas that go into the mezuzah is where the mezuzah is mentioned, which is the obvious reason, the simple reason why in the mezuzah you have these 2 pashas is because the 2 places in the Chumash where the mezuzah is discussed. But the Rebbes says that the fact that you have these two pashas and not more shows that there's something special about these pashas, not just because of mezuzah, but because of the greater teichen of the pasha, which, as you'll see soon, is the yin of Kabbalah Seil Machon Shamayim. And he says, Atziv o mitzvahs tefillin never b'teira dalat pashas. The mitzvah to put on tefillin is written 4 times in the Teira, and in the tefillin you have 4 pashas. And again, there's also many pashas that speaks about Teira, and I wonder how many times in the Teira do you have the yin of limud Teira. V'shinantam v'limadatem. Machon can achieve al kfis mezuzah never Beis pashas el de krishma. The command for putting up a mezuzah in these 2 pashas, and in addition to that, these 2 pashas themselves are in the mezuzah. So of course, the obvious reason these 2 pashas are in the mezuzah because mezuzah is discussed. But that also means that the entire teichen of the entire parsha has something to do with what a mezuzah is, which is shmira. There's a madgesh Eid Yoser that underscores even further a shaychas the mezuzah lebeis pashas eil the krishma davka, the connection to mezuzah and these 2 parshas. And the shayla is, what's the connection? And the connection is, we're talking about a higher shmira, and a higher shmira is connected to a higher avodah, and a higher avodah is connected to a higher connection to the Eibishter. And it comes down to bittul and Kabbalah Seil. Ubi er ha'inyan hu, and the Rebbe explains. Hine. Is b'mesachas berachas the Gemara says, Lo ma'kod ma'parsha shma alav ha'yim shameya. Why do we first say Shema Yisrael Adonai Adonai Echad, then we say ha'yim shameya? And he answers, Kadesh yikabel lavel machas shmaim tchila. First, you have to accept the yoke of the kingdom of heaven. The Eibishter b'chlal, kabelu malchusi. Then you can be told the yoke of mitzvahs, kablu gzeiresa, like it says in Samach Vov, that the nase is one act of Kabbalah Seil, and nishma 613 separate acts of Kabbalah Seil to each mitzvah separately, and that's a difference between Kabbalah Seil Machon Shamayim and Kabbalah Seil mitzvah, which is called nase and nishma, which is Lashon Chassidus, bittul l'rotzen and the bittul to the Baal l'rotzen, and both of them are in krishma, in mezuzah. Shemezah movement, which indicates the klolus inyan Beis pashas of the krishma. These 2 pashas of krishma is Kabbalah Seil, el Machon Shamayim and el mitzvahs. The first pasha of krishma has so many things. You have Yediyas Hashem, you have Yediyas Ha'achdus, you have Avas Hashem, you have Limud Teira, you have putting on tefillin, you have mezuzah. And the second pasha of krishma also has many mitzvahs. It includes even tefillah, right? L'avdei b'chol avavach, u'b'chol nafshechem, and other mitzvahs. But the Rebbe says the basic theme of these 2 parashas is the union of Kabbalah Seil Machon Shamayim. Now that the first parasha is connected to Kabbalah Seil is obvious. But the second parasha, Achei Temimim, is connected to Nishma. Nishma Zavon of Asagah, says the Rebbe no. Shema, which in other sequences, in other contexts, in other Chassidus, means Shema Lashon Havana, Dabek Yishmei Avdecha. Over here it means Kabbalah Seil. That V'hoyim Shemei is in Yonin Kabbalah Seil. And he brings that out. In other words, Shema normally means to understand. Understand is the opposite of Kabbalah Seil. Here he spins it the other way, because by the famous story with Shaul HaMelech and Agog and Shmuel and the ganze Meis where Shmuel got so upset, it says the Lashon Halei Shmeya Mizevach Tev. And over there, Shmeya doesn't mean to understand. It means to be mitzias, to conform. It means to do what you're told. Shakavani Kabbalah Seil Shmeya. The word Shmeya doesn't mean to understand, it means to accept. And the pasuk says, Shmuel HaNavi says to Shaul HaMelech, Shmeya, being able to accept the lakus, is higher than karbonis, higher than zevach tev. L'mayla gam, avedis karbonis zevach tev. So the Rebbe goes into a shtickle pilpul about karbonis, and he says 2 things. Avedis karbonis aganaz b'yesed. Number 1, because raza the korbana eila adraz the insef. A korban is a sacrifice. You lose yourself completely in the secret of the insef. And number 2, karbonis is kiruv akeches v'achushim. Your personality, your faculties, and your senses come close. And Lani has died to the difference between the first thing, Raza the Korban, Eila, Raza the Insafe, and the second thing, Kiruv Akeches V'Achushim, is sacrifice and bringing close. Right? The Nefesh HaBahamis is sacrifice. The Raza the Korban, Eila, Raza the Insafe. And the Nefesh HaLakis is able to emerge from the haze of the Nefesh HaBahamis and approach Halakus, Kiruv Akeches V'Achushim. So Karbonis is Darga Gaveya. Nevertheless, Shmuel HaNavi says to Shaul HaMelech, Eimim Shmeya Mizevach Tev. Doing what you're told is greater than a korban on both of these madregas. The Aveda the Kabbalah sales, serving, and Shabbat Kabbalah sales, Lamai Lakam, Aveda Sakabanas, even higher Aveda Sakabanas. The difference between bringing a carbon, which is what Shaul Malach was thinking to do, that they saved Meitav Hatzain for carbonis, and Shmeya is the difference between a Kamesi as the Varavaya. Shaul HaMelech says to Shmuel another Kamesi as the Varavaya, and Shmuel answers in Mekalat saying, "What are you talking about? I hear animals." So Shmeya Zevach Teiv is a Gavaldika Maile, but it's not Hakimesi as the Varavaya. It's the opposite of a Kima in the words of HaKadosh Baruch. And Shmaya would be Kima in the words of HaKadosh Baruch. So Shmaya doesn't mean to understand. Shmaya means to do what you're told. And this is said, V'eimem zeh afilo it's a Shol, who's the Madrega Bina, the Cheves Anor, which is Sfira Sabina. Right? Shol in the Chumash, in the end of Vayishlach, in Klippa is Merecheves Anor, so in Kedusha it's the same thing. Kimavur, B'Kabbalah, B'Kamemes. Or Mikamokam Eimem, even Shol HaMelech, who's Madrega Bina, is told, Shmeya. Not Shmeya Lashon Avana, Shmeya Lashon Tziyus. The Bechtei Shetia Kamesi is Dvar Adeshem. You want the Eibishter's words, Davka de Kabbalah Seil Malchus Shamayim. Says the Rebbe. So we see that V'hoya Im Shameya also in the wording, not just the Teichen, is the union of Kabbalah Seil Malchus Shamayim. So the Rebbe concludes, whereby number 10 in your text on page 195, if you're using my PDF. V'zeu ha'shayches de mezuzah lebeis pashas bekrishma. It connects mezuzah to the two pashas in Krishma. Ki gam inyan mezuzah Kabbalah Seil. Mezuzah is also Kabbalah Seil. The idea of a mezuzah is to accept the Yoga Deibisha. Now you want to tie it back into Keirach. Bayis molis farach hayeves b'mezuzah. P'turim b'mezuzah. Think about it now. Think about it now. Keirach is saying, I'm a big chocham, full of sifrei Torah, and for tefam mezuzah. What's a mezuzah? Bittel, Kabbalah Seil. Shmei mizevach tev. You put up, it's your home, and you're a yid, and you're a lakus, and your home is yours, and it has the Eibishter in it. Still, it needs a mezuzah. Because in everything in the person's house, you should accept the yoke of the kingdom of heaven, the yoke of mitzvahs. And that's the higher madrega. There's the zevach teiv. There's the home of a yid as it is by itself, which is a very high madrega. And then there's the mezuzah, which is Kabbalah Seil. And he finishes, this idea that the inyan of a mezuzah is Kabbalah Seil is in the word mezuzah. As we all know, it's brought in so many places. In Chassidus, that mezuzah is mem, zuzah. Mem goes on the Torah. The Rebbe doesn't talk about the mem. The zu and the zeh. Zeh is zachar and zu is nekeva. Zeh is the Eibishter and zu is yidden. And he explains, Zeh koya l'kadosh baruch. Like it says in the passage, Achei Temimim. And zu goes on Yidden like it says Am zu Yotzarti Liti Lasi Saperu, that Yidden are in a cave. That's why zu is Lashon a cave, and the Eibush is Zacha, which is why Zeh is Lashon Zacha. O Masher Ekroyim Disham Misra B'Shem zu Yidden are called zu Lashon a cave. Lefishim Makabel As Makadosh Baruch Hosh Nikar Zeh. The Eibush is a Mashpia, and we're the Makabel. So Zeh goes on the Eibush and zu goes on Yidden. O Masher Nisham Misra zu Makadosh Baruch Zeh. But you have to understand something. The Eibush is a mashpia, zeh. Yidden of the makabel, zu. But it doesn't work without yisaid. It doesn't work without willingness. And that willingness is Kabbalah Seil. The Yid agrees to be makabel from the Eibush. It's a real thing. But the Gemara says, Ein Adam Kedes Bris Elamisha saw Keli, right? And the relationship between a husband and a wife. One is a mashpia and one is a makabel, but the relationship requires the willingness to relate. And the Rebbe brings the pasuk, the Gemara, Ishak Sheira Eiser Etzain Baila. The mashpia's ability to be mashpia is the Eibishter. Zeh is based on the makabel's readiness to be received, which is the inyan of zu. Him as Chaber and joins them together, Makadosh Baruch Hu, and that's davar echad. And that's why zu and zeh are both included in the mezuzah, because it's a combination of two inyanim. So the word mezuzah also has a theme of Kabbalah Seil. The pashas of mezuzah speak about a inyanim of Kabbalah Seil. And the need for a mezuzah is that although the house is already a Jewish home, it needs to be exceeded by something which is even higher, which is in a mezuzah. Or to say it in the language of the context, There's the Shemitah that a Yid's house has because a Yid lives there. And there's the Shemitah that a Yid's house has because a Yid is mevatel himself to the Eibishter. And he's Isha Ksheira Eiseret Sein Baila, and this brings the Eibishter into the home and adds another Madrega of Shemitah. Now, I'm learning the Maimer in order except for the next piece. The last two lines on page 195 we're going to read first, and then we're going to read the piece. It just seems to make sense to me. V'hine, last page number 12. V'hine. Bayis hu bechinas klal ha'olam. When you speak about a home, the Rebbe is going to speak three madregas: the whole world, every home, and every person. And he starts off from a general way. The whole world is called a home. K'maimer azal al pasuk chochmas noshim bonsa beisa. It says in the pasuk, the wisdom of women built her home, and on this it says in Chazal, b'chochma bona kadosh baruch hu ha'olam, that the Eibishter created the world with wisdom. So the pasuk uses the word beisa. The Medrash uses the word olam. Is that ayah that the whole world is Eibishter's home? So when you speak about uchsavta ma'amavzud b'secha v'sharecha, and of course masha kadosh baruch hu ha'emer l'yisrael lasses hu eiseh. The first is he puts a mezuzah in his home, which is Kol Ha'olam, and the Rebbe adds Kol Seder Ishtalshalos. So the world is Eibishter's house. Now go back and read the paragraph before. On the door of this home you have to put up a mezuzah. It's the Eibishter's home. The Eibishter has to put up a mezuzah. It's a very high level of kedusha. It's the Eibishter's bias. And Chochma Bina Das means the spheres of Elokus that build this home. So although the home belongs to the Eibishter built it. This home, this world, this olam, which is created from Chochma, is a world which is created by the hand of God in a reasonable way. What's rich and the kvei by mezuzah, you have to fix with a mezuzah, you have to have godliness, which is transcendent through the avodah of Kabbalah Sel Machon Shamayim. And that's the chasavta mezuzah b'secha v'sharecha. There's the world that the Eibishter built, which is already his, and this world which the Eibishter built already his has a lakus and a madrega v'ishtalshalos, and then there is the transcendence of that by putting up a mezuzah. So this is the first model. The world is the Eibishter's home, and the Eibishter puts up a mezuzah. It's his. His manifestation is here. And the Eibishter putting up a mezuzah means he's adding to his world that's already his in a madrega of Tam Vadas. And Chochma Makifim, an ownership, a guardianship, a protection which comes from Makifim, which is connected to Bittul. Top of 196 now. Just like when it comes to the world in general. You have the world as it is before the mezuzah, which is Chochma, Yivne Bayis, Kol Hein Yokov and Noim. And I don't know what this is about. He's Mitzayin to Amar Med Alter Rebbe in footnote 19, and I don't know, so I apologize for that. And then, Yesh Bechinas HaMakiv, Shetzarech Lamshe, Bechinas HaMezuzah, in the Eibishter's home, which is the whole world, the Eibishter adds a higher madrege, then you have a mezuzah. Says the Rebbe, the private home every year does the same thing. That Yeshnam Shnei and Yonam Anal, you have these same two things. Why? Because a person has an obligation to say, the world was created for me, which means the following. Yes, the Yid's home. If the world is created for this Yid, the whole world was created for that Yid's home, which is Bedarged de Gedusha Beisecha. It's a very high madrege. A Yid is a servant of the Eibishter, and his home is in that service. And if that Yid has to say Bishvil Nivra Ha'elam, that home is Bishvil Nivra Ha'elam Kuli. But it's Aved Al Pi Tam Vadas. The Eibishter comes along to this Yid, and he gives him a mitzvah, Ukfiyas HaMezuzah Labayas. Means that when a Yid has to know Bishvil Nivra Ha'elam, that's not enough. There has to also be the avodah of Kabbalah Sel. So just like the world at large, there's the bias, and they're adding Shemitah to the bias, the mezuzah. The individual home of a Yid, there's the bias, which is the avodah of Seichel, and then there is the Kabbalah Sel. And the Rebbe now continues by number 15, Al Derech Zogamba Adam Gufa, that in avodas Hashem, before you talk about a home, right? My body is a home for my neshama. There's also the same two madregas. Hara yesh bei shtei madregas and two levels. Here you do be neshama guf. It says in Chassidus, based on the siddur, there's four madregas, nechlogas, dal madregas, which is those in the dal madregas klolius, like it says in the siddur, neshama tat be teherihi, which is atzilas, at the brasa, which is bria, at the yitzarta, which is yitzira, at the nefachtabi, which is asiyah. But then you say vata meshamra bekirbi, like it says in Chassidus from the Ramah, that it's koyach hamafli lasis lachaber ruchnius v'gashmis, the keeping in the neshama and the guf is a pella. And although v'ata v'shamar b'kirbi is written after nefachtabi, it says in Chassidus it comes even higher than atzilas. The neshama by itself is atzilas teheri, and the sherish that is tehiri law, which is even higher than atzilas l'maylam. Whatever is l'maylam tehiri law. And then there's something even higher than that. To access, which is above Teherihi, you have to have Shmira. And the Shmira adds a godliness to the Neshama, which is beyond the Neshama and Atil. So on the next page you'll see that the four Madregas, Tehera, Bras, Yitzarta, Nefachta is Chaya, Neshama, Ruach, and Nefesh. And the V'ata Meshamer is Yechida. The mezuzah adds to the person's own avodah shmira b'chida. So you have three models: the whole world, every person's home, and every person's body. There is their avodah they are by themselves, which is the inyan of tam v'das, and then there's adding an additional inyan of mezuzah, which is a shmira, which is a makir because of avodah of bittul. And he finishes this paragraph with what I showed you when we first started to learn. The mezuzah is, this is a zayah. Adeshem Yishma says that the Eibishter guards the comings and goings of a yid forever, even when you're out of the home. The mezuzah is a shmir, and that's the pshat shav omlu bein of beim Adeshem Yishmarir. The boina built a city, and to some extent they're able to keep the city, and nevertheless we say im la yishmarir shav, im Hashem la yishmir shav shakat shemer shagam la achrei shesh nekvara binyan. You have the house. Heina being the closer Elam, Heina ba'ayim b'chad v'echad, Heina dal b'chin shemeshavachad. All three models, the whole world, every home, and every person. You have to have Hashem Yishmarir. Hashem has to guard. Hashem's guarding is above the natural guarding, which is nimshach the mezuzah. And then he says the same is true also in Dalad Eisius of Shem Havaya. If you have Shem Havaya Atzma, you also have Dalad Eisius. Next paragraph, page 196. And the Dalad Eisius Yudke Vavke is the Dalad Madregis the Heide Brasi Zat Nefachta. And now we go back to the words which I started the shir with. You have to pray, and you have to request, and you have to scream. As they're awake, are in a madrega of Tisha, compared to what's higher than Shem Havaya. The canal, as we discussed before, it's not enough, the inyan of Tehera, Bras, Yitzarta, and Nefachta. Which means Eini Masbik Meishu Mitat Shem Havaya. Elokus, as it's begila in Shem Havaya, is not enough, not because it's sleeping, because Yochel is Bechinishim. The idea that Elokus could be taken away from us, which goes on Giluyim. The idea that the Madrega Elokus, which we have, that could be taken away from us, is even when we have it, we don't have it. And that's the meaning of Ur Lama Tishan Havaya here. Havaya is begila. But Tishan Havaya, because it could be Yasha. And you have to act Madrega Elokus, that lay yonam v'lay yishan shem yisrael. Yeshna in yanay leyesa lay yonam v'lay shem yisrael, which is a ma'ila mishem avaya. And this is the yin of a mezuzah. But now the Rebbe is not talking about putting up a mezuzah. It's screaming out to the Eibush should put up a mezuzah. That the protection of Eretz Yisrael by the 6-day war, by the Yom Kippur war, and by this war cannot be from the madrega of Shem Havaya, which is Lama Sishan Havaya, Yochel is Bechin Eshina, which is in the Tilim, as I told you in the beginning of this class, the Madrega of Es Ein Elohorem Yavi Yazri. And it has to be Dafka from the Madrega of Layonim Elisha Yisrael, which in Tilim is Elecha Nasosi Es Eini Hayeshi Vashamoyim. And I think that there's a great precision in the Perakim. The fact that this year, Tafshin Pei Dal, this is the capital Tilim that we're saying, is consistent with the time, that Shem Havaya is not enough. Shem Havaya is called Tishon. You have to have a Loma Sishan Havaya, a Layan and Velayishin Shema Yisrael. Ella, it is only Shemekomo Kamnim Shezagam Kanadei Shem Havaya. Even the Makif, even the higher Madrega of Alakus, which the Mezuzah facilitates, comes down through Shem Havaya. In other words, Eid Ein Seif is very high, but it has to come down in Eifan of Gili and Pnimius, and that's what the Havaya facilitates. Even though the Shmiras come from Shem Havaya, you have to have Havaya in the mix. Havaya lo yishmerir shav shakat Shema, the Shmiras come from higher than Shem Havaya. But it's how the hard and Shem Havaya is happening through Shem Havaya. So the Rebbes in Havaya lo yishmerir, does, to use Kabbalah Aces, doesn't mean Havaya de Le'ela, it means how Havaya de Latata creates a kav, a tziner, for the Shmira, which is higher than Shem Havaya, to come down. And the Rebbe continues and he says, V'ha'inyan ba'avaydo. This whole maimer, that the bias by itself is Kedushin, it's Elokus, and it's even Avoida. But because the Avoida is B'mididav Agbala, the Elokus is B'mididav Agbala. How do you say this in Oises of Avoida? So he says, B'pashtas. Yesh Avoida b'chol avav b'chol nafshcha, serving Hashem with your whole heart and your whole soul. It's a very deep Avoida, but it's self-connected to Seichel. In other words, even b'chol nafshecha, which is a neitlas nafshecha, it's a mesiras nefesh with the shaychas to understanding. Shuaved im ha'esek keich eshalei, the 10 faculties. B'chol avavcha means only in your heart, and b'chol nafshecha it's mispashet in your goof, but not further. Says the Rebbe, Mekomak means a mas begadayin, it's not enough. You have to aved the b'chol meidach. B'chol meidach means no limit, and no limit means by definition not less of a limit, but no limit. Absolutely no limit. Which is Aved, beyond any measurement the limit. As it says in the Chazal, B'chol midu, midu shemeded locha b'meded, whatever the Eibishter gives you, you say thank you. Even V'arach al-arok, Shem Shem V'arach al-ateva, because it's your connection to the Eibishter is an Eifan, like it says in the Maimorim Shvisi the Shem and Egdi Sawat, from the Baal Shem Tov. Midas ha'ishtavas, the Teva and are equal. And this is only possible when your avoid has absolutely no limitation whatsoever. And that's the mezuzah. The mezuzah is b'chol meidach. Even the second parsha of Krishma, that although the second parsha of Krishma doesn't say the words b'chol meidchem, the Rebbe is explaining it in that madrege. B'chol meidach. Ela she'af ha'beken tzarech li yizgam aved b'chol avav b'chol nafshcha. So I'm waiting the kazach. And I'm learning this, and I'm thinking this is mamish vata tetzaveh. You can't have b'chol meidecha without a constraint, without avoid, without any limits, not brought into limits. You can't call it klipa, but it's not tachas hashleimus. Tachas hashleimus is that your avoid has no constraint, no limit. Whatever you need to do, you can do. Midas ha'ishtavas mamish, but in an oifen that it comes down into daily life. So you have to bring the b'chol meidach into the b'chol avav b'chol nafshcha. Just like before, you have to bring the shmira into Shem Havaya. Tzarech li is gam ha'aveda b'chol avav b'chol nafshcha. You have to aveda, serving Hashem b'chol heart and whole your soul, which is aveda b'keches ha'pnimiyim. Never then, b'zeh guf tzarech li is ha'inyan the b'chol meidach, you bring an infinity into it. V'yaderech inyan is similar to the Kabbalah sel mitzvahs, which is v'hayim shameya. That compared to Kabbalah Sel Macha Shamayim is like a keli. And more specifically, the Gambim Minigela Mitzvahs Prati Tzarech Lies Indel Mitzvahs, that the yoke of mitzvahs is not only in general, but it relates to mitzvahs individually. Bringing Kabbalah Sel into mitzvahs versus just into Kabbalah Malchusi. And then bringing Kabbalah Sel into mitzvahs Prati is fusing B'chol Meidach, B'chol Avav, B'chol Nafshcha. As we said before, even though the Shmira is coming high from Shem Havaya, has to come down into Shem Havaya. That after Shmira b'chir shalamayim Shem Havaya, the Shmira comes higher than Shem Havaya. Makom makom zeh gufanim shechayde Shem Havaya, has to come down through Shem Havaya. So it's a combination of makif and pnimi. You know, I did something today which I've never done, or haven't done in any time, often. I taught to my mother. The Maimed I taught before this was the Maimed of Erev Tisha B'Av, Eicha. And that Maimed, the Rebbe talked about the Shchedish. And the Shchedish is Malchus, and your Mamshech Chochmah into Malchus. Eikoi. But he made a point. The Asad Lavi, where there's going to be a Gili of Chochmah and Malchus, there's still going to be Malchus. Or when there's going to be Gile Ve'ein Tape, which is higher than Lifnei Tzimtzum, but Allah Zachan, it's going to be in Kav, even though the Kav is going to be Negea in the eagle, B'Ksei Hasheni. And when the Kav is Negea in the eagle on both ends, the Kav becomes like an eagle. You still have to have a Kav Kotzer. Because you want him to be Be'er Pnimi, into every detail. That's the sign of Emes. And the same is true here. The B'chol Meidachas Nimshech and the B'chol Avavacha B'chol Mavshcha. The Shmira, which is higher than Shem Havaya, comes through Shem Havaya. The Layon and V'Laishin Shem Yisrael comes down into Esa Ein Elohorem Ein Yaviyezri. And the Rebbe finishes the Maimer, V'zehu. And this is the Pshat in the Pasuk and in the Mitzvah. U'chesavtam al mezuzah b'secha v'sharecha. You have to write a mezuzah, a parchment with both parshas of Krishma, which are placed the way the halacha requires it on the doorposts of one's home and the gates of one's cities. Although the home is by itself holy, because it's a bayis Yisraeli, as the Rebbe said in the beginning of the Maimer. And that phenomena stands. You have to have a shmira on top of the shmira, to have a kedusha on top of the kedusha. Because the kedusha, the bayis, from the mere fact that it's the property of a yid, is the kedusha in the madrega of ishtalshlus. It's the kedusha in the madrega of chokhmah. It's the kedusha in the madrega which is connected to reason and the physical placing of the mezuzah. That both patches of the mezuzah, as the Rebbe explained in this Maimer, are in Yon and Bittel, in Kabbalah Sel, has the higher shmira, and he repeats the same three models that he said earlier. Number one, in Yezeu Negel Kol Ishtalshlus. First of all, there is a concept in all of Ishtalshlus, the whole creation. That creation comes from Eibish's Chochmah, and still it has to have a bittel, a mezuzah, which adds a makif. It's not sufficient, the idea of Chochmah. You have to add the higher madrega of makif. Number two, and the Rebbe changes around the order. Before, it was Klolos Ha'elam and Bayis HaPrati and Ha'adam. Here to say that it's Klolos Ha'elam, Adam and Bayis HaPrati, and of course, Tzarech Bir. But Negel Adam, a human being in his own life needs a mezuzah. What's the logic? What's this context? Shenimas, Begdal, the Bechinas, the four levels we talked about before, which are Teheri v'cholo, are not sufficient. That Shetzorech Li'esin of Atam, Eshamra, Bekir, to have the fifth madrega, which is the Shmira, and the Rebbe explains that it goes on the 5 levels of the Neshama. The Mashiach, the Medrash, as the Medrash says, Chamisha, Shemes, Nikrullah. The Neshama has 5 names: Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. And the first 4 are connected to Hishtalshalus, reason, a certain parameter, and the 5th is Etzem. It's not enough nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya. It's not enough nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya. And then he goes the third example, an actual home of a yid. The home has already a kiddush. It's full of svarim, like I explained before. Takes an extra resonance when you appreciate that what the mezuzah is adding is bittul. The notion of bayis mali svarim is a room full of das, and therefore you have to affix to this home a mezuzah. You lift up the home and all that is in it to madrega of makif, and of course makif means yechida. Now my itch is my observation, which is provocative, if you will, would be that a midmeshech hanukas a bayis and look at the Teda in bracha. Bayis is yechida. Bayis is yechida. In this maimer, bayis by itself is only chaya, and the yechida is the mezuzah. So could you say that there's a lower madrega yechida and a higher madrega yechida? The yechida, which is from the bayis, because of the yid living there, and the yechida because you're putting up a mezuzah. But that's just to be a provocateur. And the Rebbe finishes. This effect that Hashem protects you because of the mezuzah. And of course the key point is that he protects you not only when you're in the home but also when you leave. I want you to know, I feel so stronger that this maimer, which was said 50 years ago, is speaking to now. And I'm remembering the camp song, you know. We have a mezuzah. There's a camp song about the Yom Kippur War. And it's an incredible camp song. They say that the camp song lost. because the name of that team was mezuzah. And the song is talking about the war. It happened Yom Kippur. I forgot all the words of the song. And the only part of the song which is connected to mezuzah is one line. We have a mezuzah to protect you. And in that song, the point is the mezuzah protects you even when you're not in your home. You have a kosher mezuzah on your home. Hashem yishmer teischa v'yacha, mayata v'yadoilam. And that's, I think, the Lebedika part of this Torah, as the Rebbe said it 50 years ago. V'yakim ish mi beis David, a man will go from the house of David. Emphasis on the word bias. V'yivne beis ha-mikdash b'mekayim. He's going to build the bias of the mikdash. And in both cases, you're going to add to the bias the from Kabbalah Selam Bitlina Mezuzah. Bracket V'agam shebeis ha-mikdash partam in mezuzah. We know the beis mikdash doesn't need a mezuzah. So how is it consistent with the theme of this maimer? That bias by itself is one madrega, and with the mezuzah it's another madrega. So the Rebbe answers, "Mikomakom Mazal says in the Medrash, Ma mezuzah zu ein izazah mea Pesach, as the mezuzah does not leave a home. Kach leitei zazah beis haknesses and beis hamedrash, a human being should never go away from the home." It's as if you're saying that in a beis haknesses and a beis hamedrash, the person's presence in that beis haknesses and in that beis hamedrash, if I may use these words, becomes the bias for the mezuzah, which is the bias itself. I wrote down on my PDF, if you'll look at PDF online, the pasuk. It's Medrash Rabbe in Dvarim Zayin Beis, and it's based on two psukim in Mishlei. Mishlei Kapitel Ches Pasuk Lamed and Mishlei Kapitel Ches Pasuk Lamed. And the whole pasuk reads, Ashrei Adam Shemeli Lishket Al Tal Seisai Yem Lishme Mezuzas Pischi. Ashrei Adam Lishme Al Tal Yem. Fortunate is the person who listens to me, to be very diligent about being at my doors every day, to guard the mezuzah, the doorpost of my door. And the next pasuk says, Ki moitzi matzah chayim, one who finds me finds life. And it says, V'yofek ratzin me'Hashem matev, and you'll get the ratzin from the Eibishter who is good. So the Medrash explains that a beis haknesses, a beis hamedrash, a beis hamikdash is potter from a mezuzah, but the person being there all the time takes the place of the mezuzah. Not because they serve the same role, but because they operate in the same way. Just like a mezuzah is always present, a yid is always in a beis haknesses and a beis hamedrash. But the mezuzah always protects the house. Being in a beis haknesses and a beis hamedrash always protects you. When you're always in a beis haknesses and a beis hamedrash, it always is protecting you. So the Rambam that the Rebbe brings, with the focus on the word bias, Yamed Melech mi beis David. The Rebbe says the words Yokum Ish mi beis David, which I find significant. Yakum Ish, the Rebbe points out, Yakum Ish mi beis David, but there's no doubt that the Rebbe is focused on the word bias. And the point, of course, is that since we're talking about beis David and beis hamikdash, it needs to have the shmira of a mezuzah, or that it should be a shmira like a mezuzah. And the Rebbe concludes, the kol zeh yeh b'bias Mashiach, that came all this is going to happen when Mashiach comes. Az yeh chayim. When Mashiach comes, there's going to be life. And of course, life means a connection to the Eibishter, that the Eibishter lept Eibik. Hashem lives forever. In our connection to Him, we live forever as well. And the source of all life, He who gives life to all living things, will give us life. That means connection to Him, so our life will not be temporary. As the pasuk says, in our parsha, that when we're attached to the Eibishter, we have chayim. We have chayim, and the mezuzah is chayim, and the shmiri is chayim, and Hashem yishmer teischa v'yacha matav ad elam. The Eibishter should give yidden seichel and koyach and oimitz and ois, and to bring about shalom amiti in Eretz Yisrael, and shalom amiti b'chol ha'elam kulei bebias Mashiach tzidkenu u'b'karev mamish. And as the Rebbe would say in later years, take off miyad mamish. If you may notice, the class is ending in a very different location. It's after Tisha B'Av, as you can see from the top of my head, and I'm not in the mountains, I'm at home, because I wasn't able to finish it last Friday. Today's Erev Shabbos Kedei Parshas V'aschana, and it's Shabbos Nachamu, and it's the Parsha of Krishma, and it's Parsha of Mezuzah. And we're all certain that Hashem Yishmer Teischa V'Yacham Matav Adelem Peil Mamish Lamata Masar Tfachim, in a way that Kol HaNegeah Behem Can Negeah B'Bav Aseinei Mamish.